so much. Please come on in and find a seat. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I know, I'm so sorry.
Vera, are we rounding people up? It's good. If everyone could come in and find a seat so we could start the program on as scheduled. Thank you so much. Here comes our president. That means we're close to starting. Thank you so much, Reiner. People are doing that, I think. If everyone could find a seat so we could get started, it would be wonderful. I don't know if we have some stragglers out in the hall. We could ask our friends to join us. My mother was a teacher, can you tell? It will be quite difficult to see the slides in the back of the room. So my advice to you is to move as far to the front of the room as possible if you really are interested in some of the slides that will be presented. Because in the back it is quite difficult to see the slides. That's my advice for today. Again, it will be quite difficult to see the slides in the back of the room, so you want to sit as far to the front as possible if you'd like to see the slides. I'll work on that. So, of course, that's the photographer. Welcome, everyone. We do have some slides. It will be much easier to see the slides if you sit to the front. This room is going to fill up fast here. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Caroline, is Sylvie around? Okay, very good. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today for the International Conference. I'm just going to move ahead here so we're already behind schedule. We're starting behind. Organizing all of you folks is not so easy. So thanks for working with us here today. We have quite a full agenda, as I hope you can see in your packet. We do have quite a few slides. Adam, we do have some space up here if you want to see the slides a little better. We have a couple seats right here. It will be difficult to see from the back of the room, so I am asking, is the spot right here, Adam, next to Babis if you want, right in here, or next to James? James, can you wave? Yeah. There we go. Great. Sorry to squish people, but if you want to see, you want to sit toward the front. Very good. So hopefully you had a chance to review our agenda. We have a fantastic opening talk from Sylvie, who I will introduce momentarily. And then we have 3 tracks today. I'm extremely excited about these tracks. The first will be technology. Our overarching theme, as you know, is connecting the dots, the future of collective management. And the dots that we'll be connecting in this international conference today are technology, education and technology, and news, and the importance, the essential importance of journalism. And we are thrilled. This is one half of our program here. We have a really full agenda. We are starting off with technology. We'll be touching on artificial intelligence, machine learning. We'll be talking about blockchain. We will be talking about the visual arts, images, still and moving, also music, a wide variety of different examples will be given in the technology piece. We have 2 presenters in technology, followed by a panel. And we're thrilled that Roani Levy is also joining us for that panel. We're going to hear some very interesting new experiment updates that Access Copyright has been doing. James Gray has joined us from the UK. He's an expert in education technology with a fantastic background that I will update you on, and has done a lot of work with some of you, CLA in particular, which we're going to learn a lot more about in regard to education and technology. And then with regard to collective licensing and content delivery, we're thrilled to have Sarah Falder moderating a panel with Frederic from Copybec, who will help us understand more about Samuel, that fantastic system that they have had now for many years, combining rights and content for their educational customers. Piero Antanasio, helping us understand how to build positive relations with universities and academic institutions. And Adonis Karatsas, the chair of OSDEL, also a publisher. His publishing company hosted the IFRRO board meeting yesterday, and we're thrilled to hear the perspective from our colleagues here in Greece. Our final track today is on news, and we have 2 fantastic speakers. Johanna Vecco, I had hoped would join us in Tokyo, but was unable to due to some family commitments, has spoken all around the world on the importance of long-form journalism. And I think if any of us, I imagine there are many of us here who read the news regularly, the authoritative news, she is an expert and committed now her career to advocating for long-form journalism. And in today's world, I cannot think of anything more important to talk about than protecting the essential role that journalists are playing in our society. And Sofia Karakeva, I'm thrilled to have. She's a marketing executive at Data Scouting and also a vice president at FEBIP, will also be giving us a talk on something that's growing and very disturbing, and that is hate speech in the news. So those are going to be a couple of riveting presentations to wrap us up at the end of the day. So I think we have a fantastic program. We are, I hope, going to have opportunities for interventions from you and questions, but that's one of the reasons why I have to be up here doing my thing and keeping us on schedule. So in that vein, I will move us right along and introduce Sylvie. Sylvie Forben is the Deputy Director General of Copyright and the Creative Industries sector at the World Intellectual Property Organization, where she is responsible for the sector's work, including supporting the work of member states in the SCCR, the Standing Committee on Copyright and Related Rights, developing copyright infrastructure, including support to collective management organizations, many of whom are here today in this room, and national copyright offices. Her organization conducts studies on the economic performance of the creative industries, building capacity in developing countries to use the copyright system to extract greater economic value from their cultural and other creative works, and administering the Accessible Books Consortium. She joined WIPO as Deputy Director General in September of 2016 from Vivendi. And we are thrilled to have her here with us today. Do we have her here with us today? Yes, here we do. Perfect. Wonderful. And I'd like to invite Sylvie to come forward, and please join me in welcoming her. This is your advance, and this is your back.
Okay, great.
And I'll jump up and help you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. You will excuse a little my voice that I have lost in Frankfurt a week ago. But anyway, I have something as well to show you. Tracy wanted me to give you some views on how we will manage and how we will, what are our thoughts and ideas for embracing the future, which is a very strong guidance from the Director General Francis Gurry, embracing the future. So in this sector, the difficulty of embracing the future is that, of course, first of all, we have to reach sort of acceptance from all the member states, the 191 member states, to the level playing field, legal framework, the treaties that are already the WIPO treaties, which are very important as they bind all the countries all to each other. So it's very important for us to look at the future and at the same time be able not to have some member states lagging behind and not catching the train. So it's a balance that we have to do each time we are looking at the future and at the big stakes that are in front of us. So in this regard, you know that of course one of the very important elements which concern our sector today is reproduction right, and the balance that has always been foreseen since the Berne Convention, the balance with flexibilities of this reproduction right, mainly exception, what we call exception, and limitation. So you have to remind that, of course, when we adopted, when WIPO adopted in 1996 the so-called Internet treaties, the WCT and WPPT, I'm just focusing on WCT this morning, there was a very important article, the Article 9, and a declaration, a statement, an agreed statement on this Article 9, which was stating that the reproduction right as set out in Article 9 of the Berne Convention and the exception permitted thereunder fully apply to the digital environment. That means that all the functioning of the balance between the reproduction right and the exception and limitation has to go along with the digital environment. But as well, something very important was stated as in this agreed statement, the use of work in the digital form. It is understood that the storage of a protected work in digital form in an electronic medium constitutes a reproduction within the meaning of Article 9 of the Berne Convention. So with that, we know that there is a very strong stone which is at the core of what we do. And in this regard, of course, is very important and more important in this new area of internet and digital, that we look carefully at how work the collective management, because it's more and more relevant, and at that moment, in the advent of the new technology, there is, as we know, a requirement to license mass uses, and mass uses is of course fit with the idea of collective management, from photocopiers to printers, scanners, PC, etc., etc. And new technology have allowed new form of use of copyright protected works and will continue. In that regard, it is something very, very important at WIPO. We take it very seriously, that we have to have a look on new licensing models, new licensing schemes, which can respond to this request of having more and more use in different situations where the use is not totally monitored. So we have, as we know, a lot of new schemes, but we have to be very inventive, and I shall tell you why in the future, in order to again continue to think out of the box or in the box, but to bring some new ideas. Of course, we have now the voluntary IFRRO licensing that Tracy marvelously represents at CCC. We have extensive collecting licensing, which is more and more important to consider for the future. We have cross-border based on reciprocity agreements. So we have a lot of new schemes ahead, but we have really to be sure, we have to ensure that it is very, that we have that in mind, and that we continue to work all together to find good conditions. So, of course, in this balance that we are trying to find in between exception and limitation and copyright and reproduction right, there is an element which is very important, and again it was stated in a great statement to WCT treaty in concerning Article 10 of the Berne Convention. It is understood, I quote, "It is understood that the provisions of Article 10 permit contracted party to carry forward and appropriately extend into the digital environment limitation and exception in their national laws which have been considered acceptable under the Berne Convention." So, and similarly, this provision should be understood, I continue to quote, to permit contracting party to devise new exception and limitation that are appropriate in the digital network environment. So, of course, we have always the guide of the three-step test of the Berne Convention, which was really the pillar of this legislation and of this balance. And we have to think in terms of where we could find a balance for the future with this digital revolution. So I shall as well quote Lord Clark of Copyright, Charles Clark, who said the answer to the machine is in the machine. And of course we have to work on adequate CPMs, right management information, standards and key, and we know that it is the future as well, and that the technological infrastructure will play a key role in the future, and that is very, very important to have that in mind. I say that it looks quite evident that TPM play an important role. Believe me, in a lot of countries it's still problematic, and it is because CPM are there in the treaties, that some of the member states, including very developed member states, have not so far ratified the WCT treaty, which is very, very problematic and important for us. Of course, we all know now that a lot of streaming services would not have appear without TPM and right management. So it's very, very clear, even for those countries which were looking against those TPM and being afraid by TPMs as sort of obstacle to access to content, that it is not at all an obstacle to access to content. So the important thing why I say that is because, as you know, in WIPO, we will have a very important exercise next year on exception and limitation. It was asked by a lot of member states for quite a long period of time. During a long period of time, we, not we, Secretariat, but some of the member states in WIPO resisted to the idea to open what they said an uncontrolled box of reflection. But we have to be open-minded and to be to look at this issue as well with open eyes and with reasonable ideas in along with us. So for having reasonable ideas, we thought that because this point was on the agenda and will be on the agenda next year with 3 regional conference and 1 big conference at WIPO premises at the end of 2019 before the autumn SCCR. In the meantime, we are making studies, reflection, brainstorming on a fact-finding approach, very pragmatic approach, just to see what are the issues. Are there issues that necessitate an international treatment, which would necessitate an international instrument? Or before this, could we imagine some tools and means which could ease this discussion and which could ease the solution on some of the issues that would have been given. So for this, we have done, we are undergoing some exercise. For example, we are undergoing typology, exception or block of exception by block of exception on education for you in your sector, on education, on library, but as well we have on museum and on archives. And those typology are designed to put some order in the discussion of what are we speaking. Then we will have the brainstorming, when we will have a study on digital issue and education. So this was asked for a very long period of time, and we do think that it's important that we make this study. Then, as I said, we will have 3 regional seminars, 1 in Africa, 1 in Asia Pacific, and 1 in Latin America. This will be next spring, and then a conference which we hope will be well informed and with a lot of good ideas on the table to discuss. So I go quickly on this. It was to show you that on typology we will take all the activities, the rights, the flexibilities, including in the flexibilities the licensing schemes, because I consider that the licensing schemes are good tools to introduce flexibilities when it is needed, and issues, pending issues which would not have been solved for the time being. So, along with that, of course, the program is going on, and as I said, our big important aim is really to have all the member states enjoying the same capacities in managing the rights. So we thought that it was very, very important to change method. For years now we have had capacity building and the result is not there. So we decided that we would focus on a country or focus on a group of country, and we would make an action plan for a year, and at the end of the year we would be sure that we got the result. So we can go with another country, and even this country could be a champion or could be the one who would play a role in the region as well for other countries. We did that with Tunisia, where we had a program organized. The aim was, and the request from our Tunisian colleague was to establish a viable reprography system at OTDAV. So we asked Olaf Stockmo if he would be free to do the job, and for 1 year he has made a big plan. Now we are nearly at the end of the process, and it will be a very great result. We hope all the agreements have been or are undertaken now, and it's very good. We did the same with IFRRO in Dakar, where we had with 16 African countries made a big program with an action plan with objectives. So it's the new idea of having joint result-based initiative. Then we have, that the toolkit for CMOs, but you know the project. Then we have the ABC consortium, where it is very important that IFRRO continue to be part along with us to these training activities, because we will have a lot of new countries arriving with the European Union countries, with the US, with Japan. So this ABC consortium will take a very, very big importance. I want to come very quickly to the Publisher Circle, which is the last WIPO initiative. This initiative, sorry for the one for whom I could repeat, but I thought for IFRRO members it was very important to have an idea of this program. This concept is a new concept of public-private partnership that we have launched after a conference held last year in Yaoundé, Cameroon, where for the publisher sector, IFRRO was there, Caroline was there with us, and we have decided that at the end of the conference we would need, along with capacity building, along with what we do traditionally, launch a new initiative which would be much more project-oriented, where we would show all together what we can do as a community of professionals. So this is based on express of interest. You can enter the circle. It's open for publishers, authors, NGOs, financial institutions, governments. It's based on a membership, because we need to have this cooperation between people who are willing to do something. The basic principle is just to have a commitment from the members to work. So you see that we will do the focal point, but we will try to build specific partnership internationally, to provide input for professional cooperation with local publishers, local authors, local professionals, and to have the government take their responsibility in this new policy orientation. This is clearly to provide a project. The first layer of course, the platform of information sharing that we will have on WIPO site. We will create a wiki very, very quickly. There is a line which is develop mentoring project, and this is very important. That is the beginning of the beginning. We would like that publishers, young publishers, junior publishers from developing countries. We begin with Africa, but we'll have a lot of other regions willing to participate, so that the junior publisher would receive the help of senior publisher outside of their country. For this, of course, we need a little logistical means. I'm ready as WIPO to launch, as seed money to launch the project, but of course we will try to have the member states of the senior publisher helping us as well. I have already some commitments, and this is very important because the young publisher, the junior publisher, has to make a project before he goes to the mentor, and then they work together, or the mentor can come as well to the young publisher company and spend 1 week with him. We can see what we can do. It's very flexible. Then after, the mentor will continue to help, because that is the ongoing help that we want to launch. Then we have, because it's very important to provide toolkit. Industry toolkit, and for this we will have a work with IFRRO and with IPA and on how to make a contract for those people to be able, for the authors to be able to speak to their local publishers, for the local publishers to be able to speak with the government when, for example, responding to a sender, an offer. Then we will have promote industry standards, very important, because in a lot of countries we don't find any standards available in the industry, which is of course a big lack of possibilities to trace the product and to organize the market as in other countries. So this is a very important project that I wanted to show you. We have a charter. I have brought some example of the charter, and I will be very glad in the meantime, in the day, to provide you with other details if you so wish.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. Thank you so much. We're running a bit behind, but I do want to make time for at least 2 comments here, and I'd like to start with our president, Rainer Just.
So, Sylvie, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And you underlined, friendly-wise, that we are collaborating already very close, and I think we have together success, which is the best thing for collaboration. And I will confirm that we, of course, collaborate in the future with WIPO. And we also will support this activity you presented to us. We had yesterday a discussion in our board the first time, and to be honest, at the beginning we were a little bit irritated because the headline of your charter is Publishers Charter. So a lot of authors representatives, of course, ask where are the authors? And after short irritation, I think we learned that meant is publishing industry, and publishing industry means you need authors, because without authors you will not have any texts or any books. So having this said, I can announce and inform you that IFRRO is going to sign the charter. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rainer. And I'd also like to invite a comment from Edward.
Thank you, Edward Hasbrook. Speaking on behalf of the author members in IFRRO, we thank you for bringing us these words and for this initiative. We had the opportunity at our meeting of the Author Caucus just earlier this morning to discuss the Publishers Circle, and adopted the following statement by acclamation of the author members in IFRRO, that we agree that IFRRO signs the Publishers Circle, and thus we expect IFRRO to emphasize that, one, this document is considered as a publishing circle, where authors are as important, as vital as publishers. 2, that all secondary use of published materials are remunerated, and 3, that fair remuneration schemes must include both publishers and authors. And I'm sure you would agree with that, and on that basis, we look forward as authors to the opportunity to participate fully in this initiative and help educate WIPO and governments about the role of authors and the ways that these initiatives, these proposals, these exceptions and limitations affect us and our work and our livelihoods. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I regret that we don't have more time for questions because I'm supposing we have many, but would you like to respond at all to any of those comments, Sylvie?
Yes. First of all, I'm very, very grateful of your two declarations. And of course, the authors are at the very heart of this project. Without authors, we have no publishing sector. And in a lot of countries, the authors, the publishing sector has considered that they could live without the local authors. And that is exactly the purpose of this project, to reverse and to begin by the authors and to continue on the value chain and to finish with a book published or a book sent in whatever format, because of course it's open to the future, but of course the authors are at the core of the project. So I'm very glad, and I think it's a very good day for me and for WIPO and for this project to have your support, both your support. And I have some charts. I can, in the meantime, in the day, give you some idea of what you will sign when you will sign it.
So I think Sylvia is generously inviting people to approach her to see the document, and she will be with us, I believe, all day today and at the cocktail this evening, I believe.
Yes.
So there's plenty of time for dialogue throughout the day. Thank you very much, Sylvie.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you for your patience while I work to keep us on schedule here. I'm just going to hand that to you so we don't get feedback. Our next speaker is Dr. Matthias Roeder, who has traveled here from Austria, where he is the managing director, of this at the Caravel Institute. Let me leave it at that so I don't embarrass myself with my mispronunciations of all of these things. He's an expert on intellectual property. If you're into music, I think you're really going to like this talk. And in addition to intellectual property, he's an expert in innovation and innovation management. His doctorate is from Harvard University in music. He's also an alum of the University of Salzburg Mozarteum. He currently serves as a board member of the Caravel Foundation. His CV is overwhelming. You should look him up. He's very impressive. But he's got a lot of very interesting things that he's done, including founding the Classical Music Hack Day series, which he launched in 2013. I think it's pretty interesting. And he's won numerous prizes and accolades for his work, including most recently the Game Changer Award of the Chamber of Commerce in Salzburg. And he's taught at Harvard. He's also taught at the University of St. Gall and Salzburg in change and innovation management. So we're really, really thrilled to have Dr. Roeder here with us today, so please join me in welcoming him.
Good morning, everyone. Let me just get my timer going here. So, all right. I'm really excited to be here today to speak to you, and hopefully over the course of the day with a lot of you about something that is very close to my heart, and that is music and artificial intelligence, but also how we can actually create businesses in a very demanding and changing technology world. So I'm going to run you through a couple of examples. AI is essentially always the thing that we can't do yet, and all of the AI that is around us we don't see anymore. So it's in your navigation system, it's in your Google photo library. When you search for people or when you search for concepts like music, it's going to find all of the images that contain instruments, even videos with instruments. So it's pretty advanced. It can also be used for silly things like, you know, putting funny little things on your face on Instagram, and it does so by analyzing your facial features and then using filters to change them. It can be done in video as well. So live video, style transfers. AI is learning about the features of a style, it knows about the features of your face, and it combines the two in real time. What is AI then? AI, as I said, is always the thing that we can't do yet, but to be a little bit more specific, I think AI is a system that can learn, a computer system that can learn from the data around it, from the environment. And it can do so by abstraction. Essentially, there are a lot of technologies in AI. One of the things that has been really exciting as of late is what we call artificial neural networks, and the process by which we teach them is called deep learning. So essentially, it takes the idea of a human brain with a lot of neurons that are interconnected, that computate on experiences that the human makes in the world, and we transfer that to the machine. So essentially, we take the biological idea of a neuron, and we represent it in the machine as a system that has a couple of inputs. You can see that on the slide on the right side. And on these inputs, it computates with a function on the output that it's sending. So it's really like a neuron in the brain, except that it's done in the computer. Of course, you know, whether you trigger or not the neuron, it depends on how the function within that artificial neuron has been trained. So, you know, you don't do it with one neuron, you have to have a lot of them, and you put them together into systems that can be visualized like this. So essentially, you have a lot of neurons. The input is, for instance, in the training, a lot of different ways to write numerals. And you basically write a 1 and you give it to the network. You say, this is a 1. You do that a gazillion times. Then you do it for the 2s, for the 3s, for the 4s, and so on. And then after a while, the network will be able to be used. And you essentially just give it numbers. And it will say, well, I'm going to predict that this is a 2, a 3, a 1, and so on. So the structure of these networks is really something that scholars are very interested in. So they have multiple structures in place to build these artificial neural networks. I'm not going to go into much detail here. This is the kind of research that AI people are doing in the field. And I'm going to say this now, and the AI people will not like to hear that, but the most important part is not the structure of the network and how you configure it. The most important part is the data you feed it in the training. And that, I think, is very important. So the cool thing about these networks is that once you have trained them and you have the model ready, you can reverse it. And what that means is, all of a sudden, the thing just doesn't only recognize the world around it, it can actually create examples that are similar to what it was trained on. So this is exactly what a lot of people are working on right now. One example that I want to show you is from the US. Ahmed El-Gamal is a researcher at Princeton, and he has fed artificial neural networks with a lot of artworks. Really millions of artworks, and he then taught the network how to actually create new art. And these are some of the images that were you know, you may like it or you may not like it. The fact is they actually put it up on display at Art Basel, which is one of the biggest art fairs in the world. And people loved it. They thought, you know, it was emotional, it was such a human kind of artwork. They didn't tell them that it was a computer who created this. And when they told them, people got really, really angry. So I don't know if they get ever invited back to Art Basel, but this is a really interesting use case, right, or example. So what I want to say is that art created by computers in this way is indistinguishable from a lot of the art that is created by humans. Here's another extreme example. Many of you may have read that in the news. This looks like a Rembrandt painting, and in a way it is, but it was created by an AI system. This was printed with a 3D printer, and it is very hard for people to distinguish this from an original. Not the experts, but you know, you and I. So there's no difference. I want to go into music because a lot of times, you know, music is sort of given as sort of the ultimate challenge for AI systems. Yeah, music is really, really hard. Here is an AI system that was trained on the music catalog of the Beatles, and this is what it came up with.
Something new, it turns me on. Good day, sunshine in the backseat. God, I wish that road could never stop. Down on the
So this was done in Paris. The Sony Computer Science Lab has created this example. I think it's pretty convincing. I mean, it is obviously an updated version of the Beatles. And I'll get to that in a minute, it's actually humans performing the music. But the music and the lyrics were created by an AI system. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's pop music, you know, but what about the classical world and Bach and Mozart? And that's not going to be possible. Well, I have to disappoint you. There is Deep Bach. Deep Bach is a steerable model for Bach chorales generation. And this thing was trained on 360-something chorales of J.S. Bach. And then it was given a chorale melody and given the task to create a Bach chorale itself. And this is what it sounds like. When I was an academic, I studied the music of Bach, and the first time I heard this, I thought, oh wow, they discovered a new chorale by Bach, an early one, you know, from the time that we have not so much knowledge about. I think it's pretty amazing, this music. So the cool thing is now you can start to actually use this technology to create with the machine. And this is an app that you can download right now in the App Store from Korea. It's called HamOn. You basically, it does exactly what the name says. You hum a tune, it transcribes it into music, and then you decide on which style of accompaniment you want to have. You can take a photo, add it to the mix, and then you can start publishing your track. I mean, it's as simple as that. I did it for you. I hummed in a melody, and this is what it came out with. I chose the New Age style. And then I said, okay, let's see what this thing can do. And I wanted to change it and say, maybe I can have a little bit more of piano. And there's a little slider for the piano. You just crank it up, you save it, and then you get this. And I don't know how many of you are musicians in the room, but what this thing does is really remarkable. It doesn't just, you know, put up the volume for the piano. It actually takes the accompaniment up one octave and it changes the notes slightly so that there's more intensity in it. This is really difficult. Most music students will not be able to do this until they have studied music for 10 years or so. Of course, you know, artists, and I'm going to rush through this, are using this too. So this is an artist. She has, at the moment, I think 2 or 3 million views on YouTube with a song that was co-created with an AI. So the music is AI, the lyrics and the melody are from her. It's a very good pop song, you know. So let's keep going. Where's sort of the area where AI can't help us? And that is where, you know, performance comes into play. To perform music is really, really hard. And AI systems are not doing that yet very convincingly. So I'll rush through that. In the Karajan Institute, we have a little research group that actually takes all of the recordings of Karajan and others, and we link it to machine-readable scores, and then create little examples from all of these different audio recordings and feed them into the network. And then the network actually learns the style of Herbert von Karajan or Leonard Bernstein, or how the Berlin Philharmonic plays versus the Vienna Philharmonic. And the idea is to actually create something like an effect system that we can use. So we can say, I want to hear this piece of music, but I want to have more Bernstein than Karajan, and you just, you know, use the knobs, and it's actually changing the recording. And, you know, we're laughing now, but we were laughing about music composition of AI too. You know, we can actually use this system to help musicians with accompaniments when they don't have, you know, someone to do the accompaniment. This is Peter Gregson, who has just published an album on Deutsche Grammophon, playing with an AI piano. This is 3 weeks ago in Beijing. We did an event at Volkswagen. So the piano is actually hooked up to a computer. It has a MIDI performance element in it. And it's listening to what Peter is playing and adjusting the playback according to his speed. So stuff like this is possible. I think in the future we'll have intelligent instruments which have data sensors in them and can communicate with AIs that live in the cloud and give them feedback on the way they play, you know, actually give them music to play along with. Okay, so I want to go into how is that now relevant for us in copyright and in, you know, actually making a business out of this. The model that we're all familiar with is that you have a creator, and I don't know if you guys can read it in the back. It's a creator who has an idea, you know, then comes a creation. We would like to publish that, so we have to get the rights from the creator, and then we can monetize. Now, the AI is taking over, you know, 1, 2, or 3 of these steps in the beginning, and it could be co-creation, but it could also supplement and supersede some of the stuff that humans are doing. And now the problem is, where do we get the rights from, right? If the AI is creating, we can't license from an AI, can we? Not in the current framework. So the idea is to say, oh, well, there's, of course, a creator of the AI system, so we can create a license contract with them. Well, let's better call it an enabler, someone who's actually investing in the technology, who is making sure that it's running. And then we can get, you know, licensing agreements with them. So we have an enabler of the AI and the creator, and this way we can keep on working our typical business models, right? Well, yeah, I don't know what the politicians are going to decide on, how they are going to change the copyright system. I don't know how the business world is going to evolve, but I can say one thing for sure. This is leaving out the most important part of the equation, and that is the data. You need the data to train these systems. If you don't have the data, if you don't have control over the data, you actually don't own anything. Because everyone can create and spin out these AIs nowadays. Amazon has a very simple tool for you to, create 1 million AIs by 3 clicks of a mouse button. But they are not going to do anything without the data. So it's a little bit like the experiences of the creator, right? The creator has a lot of experiences in their world, but that's what you need to have for the creator to be creative. So let's focus on the data and AI part, right? Which is essential. So this is sort of how we can actually start to monetize this kind of thing. We can put a box around it, and we can say, all right, we're going to create a lot of works, and then those are the works that we're going to monetize. If we can, get a license from the AI or not, we don't care, because let's face it, you don't know if the music on Spotify that you're listening to was created by AI or by humans. Here's another idea, and that is to say we're going to create an API, which is like an interface to the AI, and then let other people use it so they can then create works out of that. So basically you are turning from a licensing business into one where you actually give people subscriptions to the service. And you can create another API on top of that for the data side. So that people can upload their data, for instance, lab research, right? Raw data from scientific experiments. And you can actually even ingest data automatically this way. Or you can have Internet of Things devices like cars, driving around that collect data and hook them up to the AI system. So this way you now create a marketplace around data and AI. And that could be very interesting to do. I want to end with a few predictions that I see, and then we can discuss this. I think that AI tools will be incorporated into the creative workflows, into analyses workflows as toolkits. So we're going to have music composition softwares that have AI in them. You have text programs that will have AI in them. They actually already do. Some of the slides you saw earlier, the design was suggested to me by PowerPoint while I actually just put the text on the slide. And that is an AI system. It helps me to be more creative. I think we will see networks of content that are cryptographically enabled, so that you can have access to the content and the data only if you're part of the network and you have your private key. And all of these platforms are, they will run on the blockchain and will allow people to build these kinds of communities that I outlined earlier. This is very important because you can scale it tremendously. So input from millions of cars, input from sensors in smart cities, and so on. I think we'll see in general a growing importance of contracts that are actually created in code rather than in texts. The benefit of that is that if you have a code contract, a smart contract, and it lives in one of these cryptographically enabled content networks, then it doesn't really matter that much what sort of the underlying copyright law is, from a purely practical standpoint, because you don't get to any of the data without having electronically signed the smart contract. Then the last step, and this might sound like sci-fi, we will have self-owning services and machines. And these self-owning services, you can think of them like, for instance, you have a smart contract hooked up to an AI system like the one that created art in my earliest example. And that system has a way to actually create art and then put it on sale, let's say on eBay, get the receipts from the sales, and then make a decision on how many instances to provision in Amazon Web Services to create more art. This thing is owned by no one, but it can actually support its own living. So we're getting very close to systems that kind of have a lot of the characteristics of living systems that are creative. Now, questions to ask for all of us who are actually running businesses based on what was formerly known intellectual property of humans, and this is the time is over now. Do I own the data underlying the works that I publish? Or can I get access exclusively? Or do I need to share the data with everyone else? With whom? How many people? How does that work? Do I provide access for third parties to the AI and the underlying data? And do I have systems in place to actually monetize the value that I create this way, right? This is what Spotify is doing. They create value for the customers. And when they start to actually put AI music in their systems, which I suspect they're already doing on a trial basis, then they have something in place that monetizes that intellectual property. And the last question, am I creating value for the communities of humans and machines that are using my data and works for their companies or projects? So I think these three questions will be a very good guideline for those of us who create businesses around intellectual property going forward. They will not give you all of the answers because we don't know where this is going and in which pace. But this is a good starting point, I think. And I'm very happy if we can discuss some of my ideas and if I can get controversial feedback from you as well. So thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.
Okay, wow. That was outstanding. And thank you so much, Dr. Roeder. What is happening? So our next speaker is Stratos Joannos, who is from the Athens Technology Center, where he is a product manager. And Stratos is a senior software engineer. He has 15 years of experience in a wide range of context and technologies. And he has designed, led, and developed large-scale enterprise products. He's got a degree in electrical and computer engineering, as well as an MBA. He's actually working on something very interesting, a lot of work with Deutsche Welle, which we're going to hear about today, but also work on Blumen, which many folks in the audience here from Europe may be familiar with. So we're really going to hear a lot about blockchain here, and I think learn a lot. So please join me in welcoming Stratos to the stage. I'll give you the symbol.
Okay. Good morning. Every once in a while, there is a revolutionary technology coming along which changes everything. Such a technology can be blockchain. So, my name is Stratos Joannos. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm really excited about this. So I'm a chief engineer, as Tracy said. I work as a product manager for a company based in Athens named ATC. And I'm going to talk to you about how blockchain technology can be used by the media industry. As a company, we have a very long experience in developing and designing solutions for the news industry, the media industry, so content management systems and digital asset management systems. We have many partners and customers worldwide, so you understand we are very deep in the media industry. At the same time, we have a parallel business having to do with research and development. So we have a long experience in running EU-funded R&D projects. We try to stay very close to the cutting-edge technologies, and we try to integrate those technologies into our products. So we couldn't miss blockchain. And that's why we are really very close to adapt this technology into the media industry. So I'm going to talk to you first about the basics of blockchain. By the way, how many of you know what blockchain is and how it works? Want to see hands? Good, good. This is good. So I'm on the right stage. Then I'm going to talk to you about how we envision this introduction of blockchain in the media and creative industry. And finally, I'm going to give you some details about the beautiful project we are working on together with our partners, which is named Blumen. Let's start from the basics. So when we talk, first of all, about blockchain technology, we are talking mostly about distributed ledger technology. Why this hype? Have you ever wondered why all this hype about blockchain technology? Is it revolutionary? Indeed. The answer is yes, it is. And it is revolutionary because it managed to give an answer to a very big problem. This is the problem. So in a traditional, let's see the example of a traditional banking system, okay? As you know, only the bank owns and stores the account balances of all the users. Only the bank can see the transactions. So to transfer money from a person to another, from A to B, this transaction has to go through the bank. The bank will check the transaction, will check the account balances, will validate the transaction, will update it, will update the accounts, and will finally execute it. So there is no peer-to-peer transfer. You have to go always through the bank. And in place of the bank, you can add other authorities, other parties in different domains, of course. Now, this happens in a distributed ledger system. So everyone owns a copy of the same ledger, not only the bank, everyone. As you can see, a transaction on a peer-to-peer basis is possible. All the parties somehow take part in the validation of each transaction through a mechanism known as consensus mechanism from a technical point of view. And why it is called a blockchain? Because if you focus on one of those ledgers, you see it is like that. So it's a chain actually of blocks. Once we have a few transactions, those transactions are represented as a block, and they are tightly bound to the previous block by the use of cryptography. In that way, this chain is almost impossible to be broken, so it's immutable. No one can change it, no one can update it, no one can delete it. That's why it is called blockchain. Now, how does a transaction take place? If party A wants to send a digital asset, let's say money, to B, this transaction is represented online as a block. It's broadcasted to all parties of the network. The network parties, through this consensus mechanism, validate it and approve it. And once approved, it is successfully sticked to the chain. In this way, everyone is informed that A has moved money to B, and the transaction is valid, it's recorded, we have a fingerprint in the blockchain, no one can deny it. To sum up, now the definition of blockchain, it's a distributed ledger of transactions shared between peers. There is no single controlling entity. It's immutable, no one can change it. It's transparent, so everyone can monitor the transactions in real time, and it can offer several degrees of anonymity, depending on the solution. There are many solutions of blockchain, of course. The core features, as I have explained you, are the inexistence of intermediates, so you don't need intermediates. You can have a KYC, so know your customer solution, or anonymous participation in this network. It's fully mutable, fully secure, highly available, and something that I haven't mentioned, Matthias made a slight introduction about this in his amazing speech. So this is smart contracts. What are smart contracts? Smart contracts are pieces of code that can be installed in the blockchain. So everyone can see the parts of the code. No one can change the code, so it's there, it's permanent. And the various parties, without knowing each other, can interact directly to this part of the code, to the smart contract. So programmatically, you set some preconditions that once executed, the smart contract does something, okay, executes the transaction. This is transparent and everyone can see the transaction executed by the smart contract. So, now let's have a look at how this can change the media industry and the creative industry. What's the current situation in creative industry? We have the content consumers and the content creators. The content creators can be anyone these days, everyone having a smartphone, or musicians, amateur photographers, citizen photographers, composers, everyone. On the other hand, we have a very wide audience of content consumers willing to pay for this content. Somewhere in between, we have all those content sharing platforms, all the distribution channels, each one with its own business model. So, what is the problem here for the content creators, for the content owners? They get very small cuts of the revenue. They cannot apply their business model on their content, so they don't have any control over pricing, distribution, or advertising. They cannot access their audience. They don't even know who has viewed their video or who has listened to their piece of music. And to get paid, to get compensated for the work, they have to rely on the distribution platform. They have to rely on the business model imposed from the distribution channel. As you understand, this is a problem, and content creators start complaining about all this. And moreover, regarding copyright management, there is no guarantee that this can be secured from the distribution channel, from the content sharing platform. Therefore, we believe that the industry is mature enough to change in the next 3 to 5 or even 10 years, but there is room for change. And actually, it's not just us saying, so this comes from the World Economic Forum. They identify the 5 core features of blockchain that can disrupt the industry. So, smart contracts is one of the top features that will allow content creators to monetize, to apply their business model on their content. Of course, peer-to-peer transactions are extremely important. So the content creators will directly give content to their audience, and they will access the audience. They will know who has consumed their products. Dynamic efficient pricing. This is also something very important to regulate the price based on supply and demand. They will also be able to micro-monetize their work. So, for instance, a small part of the music song, a segment of it, could be given available for being purchased, just this segment, and the owner will be compensated with a small amount of money for this. And all this, imagine, can happen in a community which is self-regulated. So you can upvote or downvote or block someone. So this will prevent malicious activity. The World Economic Forum identified the 5 forces that could change the industry. 2 of the big consulting companies, Deloitte and Accenture, they almost have the same approach on this. So they believe in a new pricing model. They believe in a peer-to-peer distribution of the content, of a better distribution of royalty payments, P2P and C2C monetization, and consumption of paid content without boundaries. Accenture moves one step further and mentions also digital rights management. So here we will have transparency and accuracy, accelerated compensation for the owners, and enhanced licensing and monetization of it. So we dream of a new redesigned creative industry where there are no intermediaries, no intermediate platforms. Every owner can access his audience. You can monetize your content fast and easy. You can distribute your content on a peer-to-peer basis. You can define your rules, your pricing model. You can track every transaction. You don't rely anymore to the platform. And you can, of course, set your business model with your own smart contract. Now, I'm going to talk about this beautiful project we are working on. This is named Blumen. The key concepts of this project is to apply a better copyright protection mechanism, to introduce a more fair and dynamic way of payment, to allow more efficient contracts and processes, to expand the repositories of content with marketplaces where collaboratively people will buy and sell content, and to develop all this in a decentralized and crowd-based technology. Who we are? We are a consortium of 7 partners, including 2 big broadcasters like Deutsche Welle, the German broadcaster, and Antenna from Cyprus. We are technology providers, ATC and Worldline, domain experts like Kendra.io and BMAT, and research institute, which is NTUA from Athens. We have split our work in 3 use cases. So the one has to do with web TV. The second use case has to do with music. And the third one, when we are working together with Deutsche Welle, has to do with news media content, mainly photographs. So the web TV use case focuses on creating an audiovisual content copyright management and sales solution for TV streaming services. The music use case focuses on creating a global music information database for rights management. And we, together with Deutsche Welle, are trying to build a marketplace for exchanging newsworthy material. I will stick to this a bit more. What we know, what we get as feedback from the broadcasters and the news agencies is that they cannot very easily access user-generated content from around the internet. So even if they find a photo on Twitter, it's not legal and not ethical to use it directly without getting the permission from the owner. At the same time, they cannot ask for photos. So Deutsche Welle cannot go and ask from citizens to give photos about an event, let's say. And on the other hand, they cannot send immediately reporters. So you understand, everyone with a smartphone can be lucky enough to take a photo in the middle of a big event, in the middle of something really huge, where reporters, photo reporters, cannot immediately reach. But unfortunately, there is no established mechanism to sell these newsworthy photos. And sometimes this can worth millions of dollars. So again, another problem is that citizen photographers and professional photographers cannot sell a photo without revealing their identity. This can be a real problem in situations where anonymity is a must, and revealing a name could be life-threatening for the owner of a photograph. So we are focusing on creating a photo marketplace through a smart contract on top of blockchain, peer-to-peer, as I have explained to you, where anyone can upload a photo. The photo will be protected with a watermark and with a light resolution version. This will be controlled from the smart contract. So the consumers, the big broadcasters, or I don't know, anyone who wants to participate, will be able to get there, browse all the photos, and select for which one he wants to pay. Once paid, the smart contract will be self-executed, and the transaction will take place. So the consumer will get the full resolution photo without the watermark, and the creator will be immediately compensated for this. We can build more features on top of that, so we can keep the option of anonymity, but as well the option of KYC, of verification of the creator. So you really can choose whatever method you like. This smart contract also allows a flexible pricing model, so the creator can work on various ways of getting compensated. For instance, could select the option of an auction for an image, or an exclusive selling of a photo. Everything will be transparent, of course, in terms of copywriting. No one can use a photo without being noticed from the system. We can also create a self-regulated community with upvoting and downvoting. This is also something very important. And from the side of the publishers, of the broadcasters, this will extend their accessible content. So they can go to the public, they can go to the citizens and ask from photos of a natural disaster, a huge protest, an attack, anything. So can have immediately content from citizens that are at this moment on the right place. We have progressed a lot with this, so we already have a prototype to show, and we are planning to launch it as a commercial application at some point, perhaps during this year. So you can, those are some screenshots from the application. So you can upload your photos, you can set a price for this, And if you log in as a consumer, as a publisher, you can browse through this, you can search, and you can buy the photos. So you have all the photos that you can use. And all the transactions are recorded in the blockchain as, as blocks. There is a fingerprint for them, so you can browse the transactions and verify that something has been executed successfully. And of course, there is a digital wallet. There is a digital wallet for the creators to get compensated for this. For the moment here you see dollars, but actually it's a crypto token that is used for this purpose. And we also have a reputation mechanism, so you can upvote and downvote and regulate somehow the reputation. And that's it, I think. So I think
Wonderful.
I'm fine. Does anyone have any questions?
I think we're going to take them from the panel.
Okay,
so Babis,
okay.
you
So
come
thank
on
you
up,
very
and
much for your time.
Rowani, if you want to jump up. Great. Thank you so much. Fantastic. We can just leave it right there. Perfect. You just want to have a seat right over there. I'll use this. Yeah.
Go it this way.
And joining us on the stage now is also Rowani Levy, who I think everybody here knows. You want to move in one, Rowani, and then I'll there we go. Yeah, let's do a surround strategy. I think everyone knows Rowani from Canada, where she is a great champion of creator rights and an intellectual property lawyer. She's the CEO of Access Copyright. And what you see on the screen here, this Prescient site, don't go check it out right now, but Prescient Innovations is a new innovation lab that Access Copyright has just introduced and launched, and Rowani is going to tell us a little bit about that. You're going to have a chance to ask questions of all three of the panelists now. Also on the stage is Babis Marmanis, who is the CTO, Executive Vice President and CTO at Copyright Clearance Center. So thank you all. I thought we would start with Rowani, because we didn't hear from you today, so we did not learn yet as much as I hope we will learn from you about your work with, I guess, an experiment with the fan-to-fan sale of books with royalties flowing back appropriately to rights holders. And I thought if you could please tell us a little bit about, first, why did you decide to experiment with blockchain? Briefly, if you could describe the experiment and your learnings, Rowani.
Okay, well, I think to answer the first question about why we decided to experiment with blockchain, I think I could set it up, the context, by saying how nice it is to be in front of this audience and not to be talking about copyright and the copyright fights that we struggle with in Canada. So one of the reasons for experimenting with blockchain was to look at how might we kind of move away from the fights that we have in Canada. So we started doing quite a bit of research on what the customer pain points were in the education sector. But as you know, we're suing the education sector and the education sector is suing us. So it's not the time for us to kind of service them. We looked at the technology and see where the future of rights management was how it was going to evolve. And what we kept coming across was blockchain. It was going to revolutionize rights management. It was finally going to put the creators back at the center of the transactions and ensure that creators got their just reward. Finally, the promises that we had heard about in the early 90s about the internet were actually going to become true with blockchain. So we asked ourselves, is this thing like for real? Are these promises really going to come to be? And after a while, there's just so much you could learn by just attending conferences or reading about it. So we thought, okay, let's give it a try. Let's come up with an idea that today's technology doesn't make possible, but that the promise of blockchain that we just heard about would make possible. And then let's try to build it. And so that's what we did last year. And in fact, When we were in Japan last year, I was very excitedly talking to many of you about our proof of concept and what happened with it. So the idea that we came up with was, as Tracy described it, fan-to-fan sale of a book. So we all know about peer-to-peer, P2P sharing, the Napsters, the BitTorrent, but this time it was going to be P2P with the sale and the royalties flowing back to the creators and the publishers, and to throw a reward in to the fan that stimulated the sale. So that's the idea. You know, how might you activate your fan base and have them becoming your promoters and at some level your retailers, and still ensure that the royalties flow back as they need to? So we built it. We went out and we hired a couple of young men who knew a thing or two about blockchain. We built it on the Ethereum public network. It was in one of their sandbox. It took us about 2 months to build the smart contract, essentially, and a little bit longer, actually, to build a web interface so that you're not just reading code. And it worked. It actually worked. And by doing that, like I said, it's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to actually do it. By doing that, it gave us this, what it felt like a privileged window into the future. All of a sudden, we saw why people were declaring this technology as being revolutionary. And we saw also why, whether we want it or not, this is coming. And it will truly rewrite the relationships and the value exchange. People talk about, when they talk about blockchain, they talk about value exchanges and how that's going to change. And it really gave us this excitement about how this was going to happen. Now, it also terrified us. And it terrified us because we're in the business of rights management. And access copyright, like everybody else in this room that work for CMOs, we were created to ensure that creators got paid when their works are used. And as we build this proof of concept, we kept asking ourselves, but who is going to be that first person that attests to the fact that the work that's being uploaded into this smart contract is actually owned by the person that claims it's owned? And that the rights, the royalties, are actually going to the right people. Who's going to do that? And so we started looking at all of these different projects that dealt with content, similar to the project that was just explained. And it's the same approach that everybody was adopting as is adopted today, is that blind faith approach. Is, you know, read the terms and conditions. Somewhere in there it says you own the copyright, you check, I do. And then all of a sudden everybody believes that on blind faith, that this is all good. And then the work is in the blockchain, and people are transacting us on this, and it's anonymous. There's some level of anonymity that can be built into it. And all of a sudden, what we saw was the game of what we call whack-a-mole. You know, your work comes up parted on this website, you go, you take it down, it shows up there. You know, it's that whack-a-mole game. All of a sudden, it was going to be on steroids in the blockchain environment. Absolutely on steroids. We're going to be wishing for the good old days of Napster and BitTorrent. That was so quaint. That was so something we could understand and manage. So that's what we saw. And so with that, the real problem to solve for this community became crystal clear to us. And that's what we started calling the attribution problem. It's unforgiving today to just rely on blind faith. It's unforgiving with this technology that's available to us to have these services that rely on what I call misplaced trust. Blockchain is all about trust. It's the trust machine, as The Economist said in 2015. But right now, we're actually building into the system and to the new ecosystem, this misplaced trust. So solving for attribution, the attribution problem, is what I invite all of us to do, and preferably to do together. So we started this work and we started talking about blockchain, and people got really, really excited about the work that we were doing. we decided that we needed that work to live in something separate from access copyright. Because access copyright, well, you know, unfortunately for the foreseeable future, we're still going to be involved in litigation, and that's not the best environment and context for innovation. Let's just put it there. So we created Prescient Innovations. So Prescient is an innovation hub. It's owned by Access Copyright, but the reason why we created it separately is so that it can partner with tech providers, with what we call channel partners or creator sector partners in order to experiment with these new technologies. And blockchain, artificial intelligence, the two that we have represented on the table are absolutely going to be key. And the problem that we're solving for is the attribution problem. And so we launched Prescient officially Wednesday. We did it with a webinar. And the webinar is on the website now. The recording of the webinar is on the website, and I invite you all to have a look at it and to listen and to get a sense of what our point of view is with respect to blockchain. And interestingly, just a small little thing before I stop, when we announced the webinar, when we invited our creators and publishers to join the webinar, within 24 hours, we had over 200 people register. Over 200 Canadian creators and publishers decided to take an hour and a half out of their day to come and listen on a webinar about blockchain. It stunned us. We didn't think we would have such hard participation. And most certainly, I haven't seen that for a copyright webinar in a very long time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rawani. I also do want to call to everyone's attention tomorrow during the special session, which you might not normally put on your agenda. I urge you to put the special session on your agenda where you will hear several other presentations related to blockchain and technology, including one from Adam Suckling on a very substantial experiment going on in Australia. So a lot of member organizations here experimenting with blockchain. So I know we have a few questions, and Babis can be ready to kick it off because those were pretty fantastic presentations. But I do also want to invite any questions from the audience. If you do have a question, if you could please raise your hand. Babis, go ahead and get us started, and then I think Jean has one, and then I will get to you in the audience. Okay, so Babis.
Yeah. First of all, thank you all for your contributions today. Excellent talks. And I'd like to start with Stratos and ask, what do you find to be the major blockchain technology players right now? We hear a lot about Hyperledger and Quorum and many other enabling infrastructures. Okay. If you could comment.
Okay, well, I cannot give an answer of just mentioning two
Stratos,
names.
Can you just talk into the mic so everyone can hear you?
I
don't know. It's a little difficult to move it around. Babis, can you swing that over to him?
Okay, I'll use that one. Okay. So I cannot give you an answer with just 2 or 3 names. It's a huge ecosystem. There are so many different flavors of blockchain technologies. So it's really something huge. You're right, it's Quorum and Hyperledger are the permissioned blockchains that are the most popular. Quorum is built by JP Morgan, and Hyperledger is from Linux Foundation and IBM. We have Ethereum, of course, which has a huge community. So it depends on what you want to try.
What do you use?
We are using Ethereum and a permissioned Hyperledger and Quorum. So we are using, depending on the purpose, different technology. And also, EOS is entering the game. We have Neo. You have so many solutions that I cannot, answer this question in just a few seconds.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Going back to you, Matthias, you mentioned about the importance of data, and that algorithms without their fuel, which is data, cannot produce anything. And so could you tell us a little bit more about that, the importance of the data, and perhaps if you could elaborate on the relationship of copyright if we feed the AI with certain data, out comes new data. The copyright of the original data could be something that is that belongs to multiple rights holders. Who should own the ultimate output? And if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, that's a really big topic. This is essentially the big riddle that we all have to solve, because we live in a time now where not only do we produce, every second as much data as in previous decades we have produced in a whole year, we are actually only starting to create tools that allow us to actually understand that data. So it's a huge problem for everyone involved. All of the industries are having this problem. I think the main takeaway from all of this is what Rani did is really exemplary, is to say, okay, the data we have, what can we do with it? What are some of the experiments we can try out? What are some of the things that we want to learn from that data? And then not only draw up a plan about what you can theoretically do, but sit down and actually do it. So this is sort of the hacker approach to innovation, and I highly recommend it to everyone to create either in small entities inside of their institutions, or as a company culture, this kind of approach, because this is what gives you sort of an edge over your competitors. The second thing is cooperation and working together is going to be super important in this new era. And understanding who are the players in a given marketplace, in a given ecosystem, and how they can work together and be incentivized in a way to create value for everyone in the marketplace. I think the times when we say, well, I have something that you don't have and I'm going to sell it to you at the highest price, these kinds of approaches, they will work for a few years, but ultimately this kind of approach will be over. And so we have to build systems that actually understand the history of data points. How do they together create something new? We have to be able to trace it back to the origin, and that's why I gave you a lot of provenance. Gave you a lot of examples of AI systems that live in the source of the creation, sort of in the software that creates it, or in the software that people use to create, or in the machines that produce data. So the provenance of data points is going to be very important, and this is what these projects have demonstrated, and where I think a lot of growth will be.
I think that's, as we go to Jean for the question, I just wanted to comment on how remarkable it is that how open the possibilities for licensing are. Because we think about the human readable use case. We sell a book, we read it. We license content to consume it. We buy a piece of art to view it. We create images to appreciate them. And now, in the new world, in addition to all of those use cases which still exist, we now are licensing images, good and bad, those that could have been monetized for human enjoyment, and those that would be, kind of in the trash pile, if you will, because we're training computers with these now. We're training systems. So in the provenance of data, thinking about the licensing capabilities there is phenomenal, because you're no longer buying. I used to buy a subscription to these journals, but I don't need to buy that anymore because no one's reading it. I'm just training my computer with it. I don't need to buy it in the same way I bought it before. What has a bigger impact on the market, open access or that? I think it's a phenomenal question in every sector of the copyright industries. And legislation, Sylvie, wow. I mean, at the intergovernmental level, we're probably 20 years away from anything from an instrument here, but at the national level, legislation is so lagging here in helping to regulate. When you were talking about copyright law, I was thinking about contract law and smart contracts and what are the implications. So over to Jean, who had a question and is from the visual sector.
Yeah, Gene Mopsick from the American Society of Collective Rights Licensing. A quick comment for Ms. Levy and a very quick question for Stratos. I would agree wholeheartedly that persistent machine operable attribution has always been the holy grail for images. And right now that the ease at which images are separated from their identifying information is incredible. So whatever work you accomplish will be greatly appreciated. For Stratos, in the Blumen example you talked about, for browsing purposes when anonymity was required, you used a watermark. So it's an anonymous watermark that then is keyed back to an individual. Is that the way that system works?
Yes, the point is not to let anyone use it without permission. So it's a generic watermark, trying to indicate that this is not legally used if someone tries to use it to protect it.
And how does that connect to the rights holder?
It's not connected. I mean, if the owner wants to stay anonymous, can stay anonymous. If wants to give a name, for instance, if he's a professional photographer, he can give a name. So there is a name when you browse the image, and there is also maybe KYC document to prove the identity of the photographer, or there is I don't know, the reputation through the community of the photographer. So it depends on the use case. There is the option of anonymity. It's not required, but we think that this is something important, and we want to give this option to allow anonymous uploads and selling of photos.
There are cases in the news industry where photographers, for safety purposes,
exactly
want to remain anonymous.
Exactly.
They do want to remain anonymous.
Of course.
For safety purposes, yes. In the news, Gene was saying, I think, before he had the mic.
Of course.
We have a couple of questions up here. We have Anne, and we go to Anne, and then we go to Edward. Thank you very much.
Anne Bergman from the Federation of European Publishers. I have an extremely naive question, but on the internet, I think one of the keys is discoverability and visibility, and the big platforms are the places where we access content. So are the big platforms players in this blockchain thing? Is YouTube accepting that you use this technology?
You can pass that mic to Edward while we wait for the next question. And who would like to respond here?
I think when you look at the advancement of artificial intelligence, then you will see that the major institutions pushing this are the big platforms. So Google, Amazon, and Facebook. And so they have contributed tremendously to these new AI tools. The big challenge for them will be, are they going to stay around when these tools are now being married to blockchain decentralized systems? So Facebook actually has a lot of problems right now, one of which I think is decentralization networks are actually in many ways better for the users because the data flows freely. So yes, they are still around. They will play an important role, but it will diminish, in my opinion.
I think the idea of whether or not they're looking at these technologies and playing around with them and trying to understand what role they're going to play, 5, 10 years times is, I have no doubt that they are. As an example, Spotify has recently bought a startup, a blockchain startup on rights management. So they're obviously looking to see how blockchain and rights management in their context may work.
My question was not whether it's obvious that they are...
Can you use the mic there, Anne? Sorry, just so everyone can hear.
It's obvious that they are looking into it, that would be very stupid from them. But will they allow individual rights holders to monetize their content on their platform? That was my question.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's a question about how does innovation happen and how does it get adopted over time, and different use cases will have different answers to that. When we started looking at, okay, so what do we do here? So now we have this kind of insight and this excitement. Where do we go from here? What do we try to build? What do we try to solve for? One of the kind of directions that we've given ourselves is not to go against the incumbents, because you're going to face a lot of resistance, right? So, you're not, look at areas where, when we're looking at attribution, because that's what we're dealing with, rights management, areas where attribution is poorly served. Not where attribution is good enough, but attribution is poorly served. And images is a good example, which is reason why there are a lot of use cases, a lot of projects dealing with provenance of images and art. And then, you're not going to build your first project to go up against YouTube. You build it to serve a different need, and as that takes hold, and then we'll see.
It's sort of like suing the government, which is a little bit depressing. Stratos, you want to respond to Anne's comment?
I'd like to add one more thing. So you are saying if YouTube will allow this. The same question was applied to Bitcoin, for instance. If the banks will allow Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies to survive, and you have seen that after a few years, so many people have invested millions of dollars into this. So the banks could not stop it. So it's technology. You cannot stop it. You have to either get on the train or miss it and disappear. So I don't think that YouTube or any other platform can stop this revolutionary technology. That's my personal view.
Thank you, Stratos. Babis, did you want to make a comment, or no? I couldn't tell if you were trying to make a comment.
No.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't read your expression. Edward, you had a question, and then we have a question near the back, and I'm sorry I cannot see who this is, but if we can bring a microphone there while I'm getting my glasses on. Thank you very much. Edward.
Yeah. One of the fallacies about orphan works has always been the false claim that you couldn't possibly transact without knowing who the rights holder was, and therefore that there was no value in anonymously published works. So all anonymously self-published works have always been orphaned at birth, even if they were being monetized. But now you are talking in the blockchain about a much larger category of works that you propose monetizing, but all of which would be defined from birth as orphaned in terms of the emerging orphan works laws. Does that simply mean we should throw out those and recognize that they're based on a fallacy? Or is there any remaining meaning to the concept of orphan works in this environment?
This is the, can I answer that? This is a different kind of anonymity than the anonymity of the orphan works. The author wants to be anonymous to the person who tried to discover a particular piece of work, but the author is not anonymous to the system. The system knows who the author is, and that's how can be validated transaction of the work.
Anybody else want to add anything? It looks like everyone agrees. Does everyone agree? Yes? Okay. So it looks like we know who the author is, Edward, here. I'm just skipping to the back. And could you please tell us your name? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rebecca Blake. I'm with the Graphic Artists Guild.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rebecca.
I have what's probably also a very naive reaction to these presentations. My association represents graphic artists, illustrators, and designers, and animators, cartoonists. The thing that struck me on the presentation on artificial intelligence in the series of questions that was raised at the end, the question wasn't asked what these developments, what impact these developments will have on creators who it appears are going to be losing income by the development of these systems. The second question arose during the presentation on blockchain. The description of how blockchain can be utilized so that citizen photographers can start monetizing their work struck me as very close to a crowdsourcing model, where professional photographers will then be competing with citizen photographers who do not rely on licensing income to monetize their work. So my question is, what do I tell the members of my association who are in their 20s? What can they expect in the future? Because it doesn't look very promising from these two presentations.
Those are extremely legitimate and excellent points. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I think that this sort of black and white picture of humans over here, machines over there, and it's sort of the machines who are going to win. That's not what the reality is right now, also what I think will never be. I think that machines and humans will co-create a lot, and that a lot of these technologies will be used by the creators to either help them in their production or to help them in the dissemination of their production and creating meaningful relationships with the people who actually consume what they have created. So remember my diagrams where I had the user. I put the user there, but you can also put a creator or a scientist or a journalist in those little boxes. So I think what I'm arguing for is a system in which the creators have now an enhanced toolkit to work with. And so I think for creativity and for making a living from these creations, we're actually looking at a very good future.
I just want to build on that. I know we have a couple of other comments here, but the concept that was raised of the licensing of the data, that I think it's essential. Creators really need to start thinking differently about what is the essence of what they're creating and how they license it. Because if they let that go on the data side, for example, when we are training these systems, et cetera, I think that that's a lost opportunity. And the tech companies that Anne mentioned, I think will be very happy to train their systems with all of the images that your members and many other here creative organizations create. And where is the benefit for you? I'm building on what you're saying.
Yeah, I think this is a great point. Take a graphic artist, right? Right now they are monetizing on a finished product and maybe 1 out of 100 that they started. But they could work together with an AI and actually teach the AI salient features of their style. And that could become the basis for an education program. That could be the basis for, something in film where they haven't even thought about applying this.
I just can't agree more. I'm not even on the panel, but I just have to say that a photographer could create something, I was told once, like 200,000 copyrighted works in 1 year or something like that with digital photography. I don't know, and I'm not a photographer, so I apologize if I'm incorrect, but it's many, many. I mean, more than I could write books. But how many of those was I actually licensing? And now I can license every single one of them. And all of the waste, if you will, I'm sorry for my crass language, that went into getting to that perfect image, because all of those imperfect images are licensable because they're representing a data element. And I think, Babis, you have a comment, and then Rouhani. And I don't know, Stratos.
I agree with Matthias and Tracy. I also see AI as augmenting what the creator can do and expediting, accelerating the creation, even putting fine touches, helping the creator put fine touches on the work. I wanted to comment on the general theme of that. I think it exists with every time something revolutionary happens, and artificial intelligence is something truly revolutionary in terms both the effect that it can have and the level of innovation that it can create. every time such a revolution happens, there's the fear of, oh my God, we're going to lose jobs, or, you know, what are the workers are going to do? When the Industrial Revolution had happened, when new machines came into existence, the factories were created, where things were mechanized. So what happened is production increased. So I think as it happened in the world of creating physical objects, manufacturing, with the advent of electronics and computers, and production increased because of that revolution. Now with AI in the realm of intellectual creations, productivity is going to increase. So.
Rouhani.
So I hate to be the wet blanket on the panel. While I agree with everything that I said, especially what was said last about production ends up increasing, there are a lot of economists that are weighing in on the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have generally on jobs. And there's a lot of concern that there's going to be fewer jobs as a result of that. And so some countries, including Canada, is experimenting with things like basic income to make do with that. So it's you know, I think something to be to think about. We had a presentation this morning, the RO group, by someone from Japan whose name now escapes me, but maybe he could raise his hand if he's in the room, who spoke about artificial intelligence and how that is going to take over, and actually, in the case of Japan, be a positive, because they're going to have fewer people doing the work because of the aging population, and so they're relying on artificial intelligence to kind of step in. If I could just recommend one book that speaks directly on this issue, is Who Owns the Future by Jaron Lanier. And he speaks of artificial intelligence, blockchain, data. Who owns the data? What should we do about data? And I would highly, highly recommend that book as really piquing a lot, you know, throwing in a lot of these questions that we're hearing on the panel and in the audience.
He's a fantastic author. He also wrote I Am Not a Gadget, which is a fantastic book. I highly recommend him if you haven't had a chance to hear him. He's spoken at WIPO, and I've been fortunate to hear him several times. A founder of the internet who I think deeply regrets some of the way it's gone in the centralizing of power. Stratos.
Yeah, I would just like to add that there is no competition between professional photographers and citizen photographers. It's just two different use cases. So in a conference like this one, you need professional photographers with professional cameras. But in the middle of a robbery, for instance, there's no time for the photographers to be there, for professional people. So there is where you will ask photos from citizens that accidentally were lucky or unlucky enough to take a picture of the robbers. And in this case, they would never reveal their identity when selling their photo. You understand why it is life-threatening case. But it's just an option. It's not that professional photographers will lose their job. They will actually protect their photos more easily. So it's something good for them, not bad, I would say.
Do we have another question? Yes. Sylvie, can we bring a microphone? Sorry.
Thank you. To do with copyright, but just following what you said on anonymity, we know that as well. We have in this environment a lot of fake news going around, and how we can check if the photo sold or acquired reflect the reality, or is not something invented or reconstructed?
This is a very good question, and actually as a company we have implemented a solution for verification. This is used by Amnesty International and Deutsche Welle on a daily basis for verifying, for fact-checking. So we have long experience in this, and we have taken it very seriously. There are three ways to do this. The one way is to rely on the reputation of someone. Okay, so either through a self-regulated community where you upvote or downvote, or you report a malicious act. Either you rely on the KYC, on know your customer, so you need documents to prove that this is a valid professional photographer, and you can approve this. And the other way is to, of course, to perform reverse image search on the various databases that are found online, on Google, Tinai, Yandex, all that stuff. But what you can also do is to, and we are really very close to do this, it's just that I didn't describe it in my presentation, through the application of the smartphone, when you take a photo, the application can take use of your camera, so it is like verifying, so it gets a hash. Now I'm entering into some technical details. It uses the hash of the photo, and it can prove that it is taken from this specific digital phone, and at this location, if you're using GPS, and at this specific timestamp. No one can change it because this is recorded at the same time on the blockchain. So this is immutable, and you can immediately prove that I have taken this photo at this place with my cell phone on this specific time. So it's absolutely secure, and you cannot
so very interesting, protecting the consumer of the news, so because it's, you're saying you can verify the authenticity. But I would think, thinking back to Rebecca's question, this also, and Jean's, helps protect the rights holder, the creator in this case. I mean, if it was, if we're talking about, your example was a phone, but if we're talking about professional instruments used to create those images as well. Thank you for that question, Sylvie. I know we're right up against the lunch time, but I did want to invite, there's so much to talk about here. One last question, if we did have a last question. And we have a couple of last, okay, we have, yes, why don't we go right here? We'll go right here. Please, if you could just introduce yourself.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Daphne Papadopoulou. I'm from the Hellenic Copyright Organization. It's not exactly a question, maybe a statement, or maybe you would like to place yourselves. It's actually very important how the legislator will react to some issues. For example, who would be the creator? Who would be, in order to monetize all this stuff, who is going to be named as creator? Some jurisdictions have already have regulated and have, but some others have not. So in order to have to monetize all of these things and to put all the machine working, we have also to regulate it in a way that it can work. Or who owns the data? It's interesting and important that the European Union, it has it in its mind. It's not a very, it's only a thought, but it is depicted in a paper that they want to regulate the data producer's right. So this will be an extremely revolution in copyright, because there is no copyright in data. And this is the major copyright principle. But the European Union already thinks about it. So because probably already knows that this is the future, data is the future. So they are thinking of having a data producer right. And that's why they have the text and data mining exception, because already they are thinking in the proposed directive. So it's very important, all this for this technology and this innovation, but always, I think, almost the final, not the final, but it's the important saying, has the legislation and how is the legislator and how is going to react to this in order also to give the right direction. And the last thing, it's how actually, because for us it's that we're doing, how this blockchain will work with the collective management organizations. Because they are saying some, but they're going to replace, is there fear they're going to replace the collective management organization. But as you...
I can't believe that hasn't come up until now, but yes.
But as you see, there is, I think it should be used as a technology, because you see that there is a problem, the attribution problem that could be solved if it could be used in the framework of a collective management organization. But all this has to be also put in a legal framework in order to take advantage of this.
Yeah. I think first of all, your point with respect to the legal framework and how it's going to be applied is a very valid one. And I think we're not naive as well to know that there are a lot of very powerful corporations who have an interest in data being treated a certain way, or data mining to be an exception, and things like that, and that's playing itself out behind the scenes in all of our domestic policy development, as well as at the international level, and we have to be just as active as they are if the outcome is going to be beneficial to creators. In terms of what it's going to do with collective things like blockchain, when you read about blockchain, people talk a lot about the disappearance of intermediaries, and people make reference to the banks are going to go away, and anybody that plays an intermediary role is going to go away, and so CMOs are going to go away as well. Personally, and I don't think it's just because I work at a CMO, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the role of intermediaries will change, but they're not going to go away. So the role of the CMO and what exactly the CMO does will change, but the need for a collective in order to represent the rights of creators and publishers and meet the users' needs, I think will continue to be important in there.
Thank you, Rouhani. Anyone else want to make a comment?
Yeah.
I think we go to Matthias.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I just wanted to come back to something that Rouhani said earlier, and that is how AI is actually having a huge impact on our economies. And I think we all take this very seriously. It's going to be a huge problem because a lot of the value that is currently created for people is no longer going to be there. So this is why, in terms of regulation, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I say we have to not overrush things. Because right now what's happening is that the technology is going to develop very quickly. If we settle on a new regulation right now, we're probably doing the wrong thing. I tried to allude to that in one of the slides where I said it's not necessarily only the enabler who should have a copyright in whatever is being created there. We should actually look at the data end of the side and make sure that the provenance of the data is right and that we can actually all use that data. Why? Because we need a lot of creativity going forward to fix this problem of our economies changing drastically. So everything that we can do to enable creativity in every human on this planet is actually going to make better chances for us. So creativity should be really protected here, and actually we have to make sure that creativity in the end can be done in this new environment. That's, I think, what is the most difficult for the regulators right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah, it's an excellent comment, by the way. We cannot possibly know what the legislators are going to do in each one of the countries, obviously. So it's futile to comment on that. But there has been a major legislation that passed recently, actually came in effect on May 25th. And I'm sure the date makes you think of what I'm talking about, right? GDPR. And so in GDPR, there is a provision, of course, that was with respect to the right to access personal data by the person to whom the data belong to. And GDPR ensures that any one of us can go back to Facebook and Google and whatnot and get back their personal data. Well, you cannot get back what they have inferred from your data and what they have created through processing your data. So if that is an indication of where things are going, I think that may be a hint to an answer for your question.
And I think that's an excellent point, and unfortunately where we have to wrap it up, I think each one of us in this room is already contributing through the use of all of our devices and everything to the enormous amounts of data that has now become proprietary data for some of the world's largest companies, bigger than governments, these companies. And that's where it starts. So we're thinking about our photographs and our graphic images and the books we write and the poems we write and the literature, and it's the data that we're creating every day, the data signals, if you will, that are making these companies gigantic. So a regulatory effect, I don't think it's too soon, and thank God for Europe, because you know, I come from the land of fake news and we don't respect privacy at all. And it is it's an epic challenge, the challenge of our time. How are our own individual data dust and those of our children and those that we love, our friends, our family, how are those being used, extended, monetized in ways that is literally, to most of us here, incomprehensible, and not even done we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what's going to be done over time. So, you know, is that your data? The answer is no, it's not your data. And right there, I think, is one of the areas that we could start from a regulatory perspective to start to look. So as you can see, we could go on and on about this, and it is a really fiery subject and very relevant to our creative sector and also to our own personal lives. So I invite you to join my colleagues at lunch and later on today and ask them questions. We're so fortunate to have these experts here with us and for all of you. So thank you. And lunch is in the Amalia restaurant, which is the same as the breakfast room on the lower level. So we'll see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have a card?
I do. In my bag, I will give you a card. Yeah, I'd love to see how we can maybe